Disclaimer.
The Legend of Vox Machina! This animated fantasy show follows a mercenary group known as Vox Machina, a colorful cast of minstrels, clerics, and rogues alike as they travel through the magical lands of Tal'Dorei. On a personal quest to kick butt and earn gold, this unlikely group of heroes uncovers multiple threats to Tal'Dorei, from dragons and necromancers to conspiracies that risk the destruction of everything our heroes hold dear. I've been waiting for this show to release ever since Critical Role dropped their Kickstarter announcement back in 2019. Jesus, that feels like a lifetime ago. For the unaware, Critical Role is a live-streamed fantasy show where the group conducts a live play of their home tabletop RPG game. Among our primary players are an assortment of acclaimed voice actors and directors who boast various BAFTA awards and even a Daytime Emmy among them, who use their game to tell an improvised fantasy story that has won the hearts of nerds across the globe. Critical Role has been among the many live play shows that have helped spark renewed interest in the tabletop RPG hobby, alongside shows like The Adventure Zone, Dimension 20, and Acquisitions Incorporated. But it's undeniable that Critical Role is the Coca-Cola of live play RPG content. When I was first getting interested in tabletop RPGs and wasn't really sure what they even really were, I watched this show to get an idea of how they worked. And when I realized this hobby was right up my alley, I jumped from Critical Role to my RPG of choice like so many others. So naturally, when I saw that Critical Role was trying to fund a 20-minute animated special based on their first campaign, I was excited by the prospect. I can't think of any bigger dream for professional voice actors than being able to fund a personal project featuring characters that they created, and it was a humble goal seeking $750,000 to fund that single 20-minute episode. And then they raised $11 million, broke multiple Kickstarter records, and got picked up by Amazon Prime Video for a second season. So there's been a lot riding on the success of this project from what is now a substantial online media brand. And now that the full first season has finally been released, I have to ask, did I end up liking this project? Was it worth it in the end? I'm gonna be completely honest with you folks. As a fan, yeah, of course I love this show. The characters are faithfully brought to life, the action is fluid and easy to follow, and the showrunners condensed one of the original show's most beloved story arcs into an easily consumable show that packs a punch that's just as, if not more impactful than the original version. The show remains very faithful to the original broadcast, switching between scenes of drama and humor with great ease, and retaining the violence, sex, and mature tone that fans have come to expect. The animation has a solid art style, with the magic effects being especially good, and the show boasts a pretty good soundtrack, which is accentuated by the resident bard character, Scanlan Shorthalt, who sings his own memorable, funny, and often wildly inappropriate songs. Plus, the overall story of this season, focused from episode 3 onward, is gripping. Even though I already knew where the plot was going, I was still deeply invested in the story and its characters. But as a critic, I agree with the above, but I do have some minor concerns that can't be ignored. Put away the pitchforks, critters. I'm not here to ruin your fun. Something can still be good and have some flaws. Nobody's perfect, right? Just hear me out for a second, okay? I know that a lot of folks have this general 3-episode rule when it comes to TV shows, where they'll watch the first 3 episodes of a given program before deciding if they should keep going or not. However, I have my own rule which some might find harsher, but it saved me a lot of time in the long term regarding TV shows. My personal rule is simple. I give a TV show 1 episode to hook me. That doesn't mean the premiere episode needs to blow my face off with how amazing it is or anything, but I need to find a point of interest in either the characters, the world, the style, the presentation, or the story to continue. If the first episode intrigues me, from there I give the 3-episode treatment everyone else does to see if it's worth investing further time in. I tell you all of this because this personal rule is where I find the major flaws in The Legend of Vox Machina, the first episode. It should be somewhat obvious that The Legend of Vox Machina is much easier to get into if you're already a fan of Critical Role, or at the very least, are familiar with the common fantasy tropes present in most role-playing games. So if you don't have either of these prior experiences, Episode 1, titled The Terror of Tal'Dorei, Part 1, has a lot of establishing to do, and it can be very overwhelming to new viewers. The first episode has to establish the setting, the key players in the fantasy continent of Tal'Dorei, and also introduce 7 named primary characters in a way where none of our heroes feel tossed aside. That is a lot for a new viewer to take in, and it's not helped by the fact that the series premiere is half of a 2-parter episode, meaning viewers are getting an incomplete story either way. When combined, parts 1 and 2 of The Terror of Tal'Dorei does have a fast pace that might leave you feeling left in the dust if you don't have that aforementioned prior knowledge. I believe that part of this pacing issue comes from 2 places. Firstly, the story of these first 2 episodes was not a part of the original Critical Role show. While the story was recounted in an animatic about all the adventures that happened prior to the show's broadcast, it's not something that was recorded. Thus, the team behind The Legend of Vox Machina presumably only had the cast's memories of that adventure to pull from. This is in contrast to the rest of the show, which has tons of content to pull from the original broadcast. The second issue is that this story, The Terror of Tal'Dorei, exists partially as a setup before the real story of this season begins. This story does a lot of that setup by establishing the characters and setting so they don't have to detract from what is arguably one of the best arcs of Critical Role, the Briarwood storyline. That said, these first 2 episodes don't only serve that purpose, as The Terror of Tal'Dorei does end up tying into the overarching events of the show as we lead into the already confirmed second season, but these are critiques that are worth noting. Despite the large cast, the series does a good job of setting up basic character traits for each of our 7 protagonists or viewers to latch onto at the beginning. But even still, you'll still need some baseline knowledge of fantasy tropes to get an idea of the rules for the world. Otherwise, there's a lot of moments that might feel like plot conveniences, especially when it comes to spellcasting. If you've ever played a tabletop RPG, there's moments in the show, like a scene where the gnome healer Pike Trickfoot finds herself unable to heal others that is easily understood as the character having spent all of her uses of that ability. However, there's no in-show explanation for that event or the magic system as a whole, so this can be a noticeable blind spot for new viewers. Thankfully, as the series goes on, the show does get better in each of these regards. While the rules for this world's many forms of magic aren't fully established, through the characters of Keyleth and Pike, we can see that their powers falter when they doubt themselves or take heavy damage in battle, which sets up a basic rule for new viewers to latch onto. In addition to the fantastic voice performances all around, there's a ton of great character moments throughout the show that could have easily been cut from the hours of content they had to adapt. From the negative brain cell schemes of Grog and Scanlan, the pining admiration between Vax and Keyleth, and the bond between Keyleth and Percy over losing their families, these scenes not only make the group feel closer together, but also adds necessary depth to these characters. These interpersonal interactions show where this ragtag group of mercenaries finds common ground, and helps endear them to the audience beyond the initial personality quirk given in the first episode. It's no easy feat taking over 48 hours of story and condensing it into roughly 1/10 of the time, but they succeed, especially by giving our characters room to shine. Part of the success of Critical Role is in seeing these respected voice actors create their own characters and watch these personalities bounce off each other, and that core could have very easily been lost in adaptation. Bringing these actors into the writer's room and having them so involved in their dream project is not only admirable, it's necessary. And the result is a show that works, because the heart of that original webcast still shines in adaptation. So while I'll admit that this show doesn't fully pass my 1 episode rule, those who give it the 3-entry try will finish episode 3 with the beginning of one of the most beloved stories of Critical Role, and this is where the hype behind this series gets fully realized. I think The Legend of Vox Machina has enhanced the Briarwood arc in several ways. Percy's dark and tragic backstory makes for compelling character growth, and leads us through a gothic horror setting that is oozing with creep. This dose of fantasy horror is something I find a bit lacking in mainstream popularity, so I'm beyond happy that The Legend of Vox Machina has delivered yet another great entry in this often forgotten corner of the fantasy world. In essence, The Legend of Vox Machina does have some hoops to jump through at first, especially for newer viewers, but if you find that this show passes your 3-episode rule, you'll get an amazing animated fantasy show with great characters and a gripping story. So let us know what you thought of The Legend of Vox Machina in the comment section down below. Don't forget to drop a like or dislike, and subscribe for future videos. If you're hungry for more tabletop RPG content, I recommend checking out Tabletop Tips, a series over on the Arcane Opal, a channel that my videos keep linking to for some reason, but I'll leave a link in the description if you want to check that out. Either way, I hope you stick around, because we've got lots of great content on the way that you won't want to miss. Okay, thanks, bye!